All right, we're up to chapter 4, page 40. Now, beginning with chapter 5, the next chapter after this one is when they devote one chapter per each one of the 7 commandments, meaning chapter 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Each one of them will be discussing one of the 7 Noahide commandments, respectively. This chapter is a general, so to say, introduction, even though until now we've been discussing different introductions, such as returning to Hashem, much of which over here is also straight out of the Rambam Maimonides, and much of it is just straight translation. Some of it lends itself to in-depth discussion. One may call some of it controversial, but for the most part, again, it's just straightforward translation for the most part. So they're not really giving their own 2 cents, if you will, or giving their explanation for the most part. All right, so without any further ado, chapter 4, the 7 laws of the children of Noah. Page 40. And we're going to discuss over here things which are permitted and things which are actually encouraged for a Noahide to observe, to keep, even though you wouldn't think that they're part of the 7, because the 7 is a very short list of 6 prohibitions and 1 positive act. So where do all these fall into? So that's what we're going to discuss here as well. 1. With respect to God's commandments, all of humanity is divided into 2 general classifications: the children of Israel and the children of Noah. That's it. Right now, yes, of course, the 70 nations, and in the Jews themselves and the children of Israel, there's the Israelites, the Levites, there's the priests, the Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim. There are 12 tribes. There are many ways to divide them. The menorah, the candelabra, has 7 branches corresponding to 7 different types of Jews based on the 7 Kabbalistic attributes. There's many ways to divide them. There are Jews. And likewise, children of Noah. You could say, well, there are people that accept these commandments. There are people that observe these commandments because they're God-given. Then you have people that don't. Then you have people that are idolaters. Then you have this religion, that religion. They are all B'nai Noach, children of Noah. So there's 2 types of human beings: Jews, B'nai Israel, and non-Jews, B'nai Noach, period. 2, the children of Israel are the Jews, the descendants of the patriarch Jacob. Now, mind you, we didn't say Abraham and Isaac because not everyone that comes from Abraham and Isaac is a Jew, because we had, of course, other children of Abraham, and Isaac had Esau. But if you are a descendant of Jacob, again, it has to be by Jewish law, meaning the maternal line, but otherwise one would be part of the children of Israel, a Jew. They are commanded to fulfill the 613 commandments of the Torah. Now, again, if you open up the Bible, the Chumash, or for that matter, the entire 24 books of the Tanakh, you will not be able to come up with 613. You will not. You try to count commandments, you will come up with much more than 613. 613 is the special number that we have as an oral tradition given all the way by God to Moses at Sinai, and it's been transmitted from generation to generation. And that is the undisputed number that everybody agrees that there are 613 commandments for the Jewish people. Now, what they are, for that we need the oral Torah, which would basically be the Talmud. But otherwise, the Jews have 613 commandments, which most of them cannot be fulfilled when you don't have the Holy Temple, the Beis HaMikdash, standing in Jerusalem as it should be. Number 3, the children of Noah comprise the 70 original nations of the world and their branches. They are commanded concerning the 7 universal laws, also known as the 7 laws of the children of Noah, or the 7 Noahide laws. These 7 universal laws pertain to idolatry, blasphemy, murder, theft, sexual relations, eating the limb of a living animal, and establishing courts of law. That's the list. And there are many things which are part of these general categories. So originally there were 70 nations, and you can find it right after the flood. It's right there in the book of Genesis. It lists the 70 nations. Of course, as time went on, they branched off into many others. So there's, on the one hand, many more, and then others just completely faded away, whether it was wars or whatever it was, and they were extinct. So we don't really have the same original ones, but any human being today on the planet is a descendant of at least one of, or maybe multiple, with all the intermarriage, comes from those original 70 nations. You have to be. If you're a human being, you are a descendant of those 70 or part of the 70 nations. 4, all 7 universal laws are prohibitions. Do not wonder at this. Negative commandments are of a higher order than positive commandments, and their fulfillment, which takes more effort than positive commandments, earns a greater reward. Now, that's a very beautiful, and it's a very Jewish, especially Hasidic concept that they gave us in this short paragraph, because they are addressing a very natural question that one would have. And that is, how am I supposed to serve God and relate to God by him giving me a list of things that I'm not supposed to do? That sounds, forgive me for saying so, but a little bit lame or kind of sad, kind of depressing. I want to serve God. I want to come close to God. What can I do? Don't kill. Don't murder. Don't. So what they're telling us over here is you should know. And this applies really in Jewish law. We have, out of the 613, roughly half positive, half negative. There's actually more negative. 365 negative commandments, the don'ts, the prohibitions. 248 positive commandments, the do's. And as they say in this short paragraph, when a person actually has the opportunity and has the inclination or the will to transgress one of the negative commandments, one of the prohibitions, and they exercise self-control, and they make the right decision, and they refrain, the reward that the person gets, and for that matter, the godly light, the energy that they bring into the world is greater, of a higher degree, than when fulfilling a positive commandment. Because it takes more effort, therefore, as the rule is, according to the effort is the reward. So that's just like, for starters, like to put you you put your mind at ease that why are 6 out of the 7 prohibitions? Well, you should know that when you keep a prohibition, when you don't transgress and you obey, that is greater than a positive one, even though our nature is that I'd rather do something than just not do something wrong. But more about that later. 5, men and women are equal in their responsibility to observe the 7 commandments. Straightforward, very clear. Doesn't mean that there aren't details that apply to only one gender, but as far as keeping these 7, they apply equally to men and women. Whereas by the Jews, that's not necessarily the case. There is a whole category of commandments that women are exempt from. Not so by the 7 Noahide commandments. 6, it is a matter of dispute as to when a person becomes responsible for his or her actions under these laws. And again, before we go any further, for the Jew, it's very clear. It's the age we call bar, or bas mitzvah, which traditionally for a boy is 13 and for a girl is 12, and that may actually not be so accurate. It may depend on their physical maturity, their pubic maturity. But be that as it may, it's age 13 or 12 for a boy or girl. Under that age, regardless of what physical maturity they have, under the age of 13 for a boy or 12 for a girl, they are exempt from all mitzvahs, all commandments. But what about the Noachide? Well, it's not as clear. One opinion holds that it depends on the intellectual development of the individual, which makes it more complicated, at least in the times that we had a court system and they would actually punish an individual who transgressed. That means that every case had to be judged individually. Forget about the case. The individual transgressor had to be clearly defined, and you had to analyze the person's intellectual level at the time of the sin that they committed the crime. So just because he or she are 17 years old may not make them responsible. Or many countries, 18 is adulthood, 21. What happens if this person is 22 years old and they're still immature intellectually? All right, they're a little slow. They're not mentally retarded. They're just a little bit slow. Well, then, if whatever that means, if that were to be the case, then they're still considered a minor and they're not responsible. So each individual would have to be judged. According to this opinion, as soon as the child has attained the maturity to understand the meaning and significance of the 7 universal laws, he is obligated to the fullest extent of the law. So working the other way, the example I gave was the other direction. How about if you have a 10-year-old child, very intelligent, very intellectually mature, and they really understand these prohibitions? Well, then they're responsible. Why not? Whereas in Judaism, it's very clear, 13 and 12, that's it. So that's according to the opinion that you go by each individual's intellectual development, their maturity. The other opinion is that a boy reaches the age of legal responsibility at his 13th birthday and a girl at her 12th birthday, just as it is for a Jew. That would make it much simpler, just as in a case of a Jew. If it's a day before their birthday, they didn't turn 13 or 12 yet, at the time that they committed the sin, they are not held responsible, they're not accountable, and you may not punish them. If they did turn 13 or 12, then they are responsible adults. So that is actually a dispute going back to what we call in rabbinic literature, the period of the Rishonim, which is roughly, by now, about 1,000 years ago, that era. It's after the Talmud. Talmud does not discuss this clearly. This is the commentaries that come after the Talmud. To just throw out a couple of names, so you can get an idea, there's the Rosh, which is an acronym for Rabbeinu Asher, R-O-S-H in English. That would be one of the opinions. And then you have, of course, we keep on discussing, and the one that we quote most often is Maimonides, the Rambam. And of course, Rashi is from the greatest Rishonim, the main commentary on scripture and on Talmud. 7. The children of Noah are permanently warned concerning the 7 universal laws. This means that ignorance of the law is not a valid defense. One cannot claim, for example, that he did not know that idolatry was one of the 7 commandments. Nor can he claim that he did not know that bowing down to an idol constitutes idolatry. Parenthetically, he can, however, claim that he did not know that such and such was an idol, for this is not ignorance of the law. So there's a technical sort of a loophole. Therefore, one is duty bound to study the 7 universal laws to the best of one's ability and to teach the knowledge of them to one's children. In other words, you can't say, I did not know. What didn't you know? That there are 7 Noachide commandments? That you're a Noachide? What didn't you know? So therefore, this is what we're doing right now, teaching it, and it's the responsibility of every individual Noachide to study it themselves. And of course, as he just said, to your children, you're obligated to teach your children right from wrong. Well, guess what? This is right from wrong in the book of God. In addition to everything else that you want to teach them about safety and all the rules that you need to know how to survive, or not just survive, but how to thrive in our society. And you want to teach them basic things such as reading, writing, arithmetic, whatever. You want to teach them these 7 laws. That's very important because in a case of a Jew, there needs to be a warning in each case when a Jew transgresses, in order for the court to be able to punish the person. There needs to be witnesses and a proper warning. And the warning is really there to differentiate between unintentional and intentional, not so much to educate the person, but if they weren't warned, there's room to say that they forgot that this was forbidden or whatever. And that might not apply in the case of a Noachide. Number 8. When one of the children of Noah resolves to fulfill the 7 universal commandments, resolves, not saying in front of anybody, person decided, they made the commitment, his or her soul is elevated. As soon as you make that resolution that I am going to keep these 7 universal divine laws, that person at that moment, their soul is elevated. This person becomes one of the Chasidei Umois Ha'olam. In the way they always translate into English, the pious ones of the nations, and receives a share of the eternal world, which we discussed last week. The Holy Scriptures call one who accepts the yoke of fulfilling the 7 universal laws a ger toishav, a proselyte of the gate. This person is permitted to live in the land of Israel and to enter the holy temple in Jerusalem and to offer sacrifices to the God of Israel. Now, I don't want to get off onto a tangent. I just want to mention, we may discuss it at length, but I just want to mention right now, I can't let the opportunity pass that one of the co-authors of this book, Chaim Chlorfin, years later, actually wrote a book, as you may know, all about ger toishav nowadays. His understanding of this concept of a ger toishav. But basically, ger toishav, you're not getting into it over here. They're saying that what is a ger toishav? One who accepts these 7 commandments, and therefore they're permitted to live in the land of Israel and enter the holy temple, which obviously that part can only be when you have a temple, and they can make sacrifices to the God of Israel in the temple, which again, when you have a temple. There's a lot to discuss about the ger toishav, but let's leave it at that for now. Let's just continue reading here. 9. Although the children of Noah are commanded only concerning the 7 universal commandments, they are permitted to observe any of the 613 commandments of the Torah for the sake of receiving divine reward. The exceptions to this are, and now we're going to give seemingly a pretty short list of exceptions. Now, there are other exceptions, but this is clearly what it says that they cannot do. Otherwise, any one of the 613, except for the ones that they're not allowed to, if they want to do it voluntarily as as one who's not commanded it, they may, and they get rewarded to a lesser degree than one who's commanded. What are the exceptions that a non-Jew, a Noachite, may not do? A, observing the Sabbath in the manner of the Jews, resting from the actions that were needed for the building of the tabernacle during the exodus from Egypt. In other words, when it comes to laws of Shabbos, what a Jew biblically is forbidden to do, which is called the way that he does keep the Shabbos, which again, by the way, is mostly don'ts. Believe it or not, the way that you observe, that a Jew observes Shabbos is basically don't. 39 don'ts times 39. And that's without the rabbinic prohibitions, which then you'd have to add several hundred or perhaps thousand more. So you're talking over here about don't. And the do's of Shabbos, very few. It's basically make the Kiddush Friday night and make the Havdalah Saturday night. And biblically, you don't even have to do it over a cup of wine. It may just be make a statement, say 2-3 words, and you're good to go. That's the only positive commandment, except for when there's a temple, of course. So then there are many other important mitzvahs that were done in the temple connected to Shabbos. That's true. But otherwise, Shabbos is all about refraining, resting from milacha. There is, in my limited knowledge and understanding of the English language, or especially in the context of Jewish law, I may be wrong, but to my understanding, there is no proper way to translate. I didn't say define, I said translate. To translate milacha, that which is prohibited biblically to do on Shabbos. It's commonly, of course, it's very easy to translate it as work or labor. Well, first of all, if you really want to get nitty gritty, and you have to know linguistics and find out the origin within the English language. Of course, this is already a 10th cousin from how it started, and you have to go back and the research. What does the word work come from? What is the origin of the word? What does it mean? Or for that matter, labor or any other such synonym. So putting that aside, and for those that are interested in that, that's an amazing, beautiful thing if that's your line of interest. But practically speaking, what is forbidden for the Jew on Shabbos is milacha. Milacha in the context of Shabbos is any specific task that was done in the construction of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle in the desert, in the wilderness that we had for nearly 40 years with us. We had the edifice, the temporary building that was God's home. Later on in the land of Israel, it became the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. This was the prelude to that. This was the fulfillment of that commandment, and you were able to assemble it and to take it apart, which they actually did from each place that they went to. So in order to construct the tabernacle and services that were necessary to do any of those 39 tasks, activities, are the 39 things that are the major forbidden labors that a Jew can't do. And each one of them biblically has a whole list of subdivisions. They're just as forbidden. They're also biblical. So let's just say 39 times 39. So it's a lot. Those are the things that biblically a Jew cannot do on Shabbos. He has to refrain from those things. A non-Jew is forbidden to observe Shabbos, which means they cannot refrain from sundown on Friday until nightfall on Saturday from doing all of the above for the sake of keeping the Shabbos as a Jew does. That's forbidden for a Noach. Now, I know I said a lot because I wanted to make it clear that which is, in my opinion, undisputably correct. Any less than what I said, we can debate and argue and discuss. But what I said, the way I presented it, I think everybody, even Chaim Chlorfine today, would need to agree with. I would hope so. Number B. Letter B. Observing the Jewish holy days in the manner of the Jews, meaning resting in a similar manner to the Sabbath. Again, he's not getting into all the differences, but basically, Jewish holidays, except for when they fall out, except for the parts that fall out on the Shabbos, they're like Shabbos, with the exception of a whole bunch of things that one is allowed to do, which on Shabbos they're not. And it's basically preparing food related. Things which are cooking, etc. On Shabbos, they're forbidden, and on Jewish holy days, they are permitted for the Jew. But otherwise, it basically means to rest from melacha on these days. A non-Jew cannot, you may not observe Rosh Hashanah in that fashion, or Yom Kippur, or Sukkot, or Pesach, or Shavuos. C, top of page 42. What else is an exception that a Noachite may not do? Studying those parts of the Torah that do not apply to the Noachite's service of God. Now, all of this is going to be discussed. D, writing a Torah scroll, the 5 books of Moses, or receiving an aliyah to the Torah, reading a portion of the Torah at a public gathering. Even if the section that we're reading, those few verses, are about a Ger Toshav or something, or they're only, or they apply to a Noachite. Doesn't matter. Noachite may not write a Torah, may not receive an aliyah being called up formally to the reading of the Torah. E, making, writing, or wearing tefillin, the phylacteries worn during prayer that contain portions of the Torah. Those little leather black boxes that we put on the left bicep and on the head. A Noachite may not write them or wear them. F, writing or affixing a mezuzah, the parchment containing portions of the Torah, to one's doorposts or gateposts. Now, if you're very learned or you have a lot of information, you might right away ask about the mezuzah one. Well, didn't Rabbi Judah the Prince, didn't Rabbi Yudah Nasi send a gift to his non-Jewish friend, Antoninus? What happened over there? So he did, but it wasn't for the sake of a mitzvah, and the intention was not for him to put it on his doorpost. So in other words, a Noachite cannot fulfill the mitzvah of mezuzah. Note, parenthetical note. A prime purpose of the 7 universal laws is to teach the children of Noah about the oneness of God. And therefore, those parts of Torah that pertain to this knowledge are permissible for him to study. And that opens up a wide door. This includes the entirety of the 24 books of the Hebrew scriptures, excluding nothing. So you already got, that's the whole Tanakh. According to them, 24 books. We didn't say which commentaries or what, but to study the Pesukim, or with a good, accurate translation, the Bible, 24 books of the Tanakh. Also, the study of any part of the Torah that brings one to greater knowledge concerning the performance of the 7 Noachide commandments is permissible. Now, of course, don't take advantage and say, well, this could be, within logic, if studying this is part of or is directly related to the 7 Noachide commandments. But Talmudic or halachic study of subjects that pertain exclusively to the Jewish service of God is forbidden. The Noachide who studies portions of the Torah that do not pertain to him damages his soul. So you're not doing anybody a favor. You may be curious, you may be attracted to it, which is what's coming up next, which may mean maybe this person is a potential ger tzedek. We'll discuss that on the next page. But basically, you're not doing anybody any favor. Now, being involved in this for so long, as many of us have been, so one can come with the following argument and say, I'm not allowed to keep Shabbos. Person's a Noachide and he says he can't keep Shabbos. Okay, well, I need to know what I can't do. Not only that, furthermore, the non-Jew does play a very practical, every single Shabbos, a very practical, important role in Shabbos, in his non-observance of the Shabbos, and that is when the Jew asks the non-Jew a favor, do this, do that, do the other, which I, as the Jew, cannot do. That happens to be a very complicated section of the laws of Shabbos that, unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation amongst the Jews, amongst the religious, the observant Jews that keep Shabbos. There's a lot of misunderstanding in that area. And sometimes it goes both ways. Sometimes things which a Jew is permitted to tell a non-Jew to do for him, people think, oh, I can't do that. And more often, the other way around. Jews sometimes think, oh, I'm just telling the non-Jew to do it. I'm not doing it, he's doing it. And it's not allowed in many of those cases. So it would be a nice service if the Noachide, if the non-Jew, the Goy, knew these laws, and when the Jew tells him, can you please do this? And he'd say, you're not allowed to ask me to do that. Say, what? You're not allowed to. I cannot do that for you. Oh, so let me hint it to you. And then it would be nice if you could say, well, in this case, you can't even hint it to me. What? As a matter of fact, when I come to do that, you need to protest and stop me from doing it. So there are areas in the laws of Shabbos that I guess if you take it from that angle, a Noachide can study. But we have to be honest with ourselves. You need to study it solely for the purpose of knowing your role. You cannot study the laws of Shabbos because they're interesting. You have to be honest with yourself. Don't study them because you want to come closer to God, because as he just said, no, it actually damages your soul. God doesn't want you to keep Shabbos, doesn't allow you to keep Shabbos. And the same thing would apply to the laws of tefillin. Just don't wear tefillin. Just don't participate in the making and the manufacturing of the tefillin. It's that simple. Well, I need to know what I can't do. No, that doesn't work. That, in my humble opinion, is definitely stretching it too far. If it's tefillin related, then you can't do it. Don't learn the laws of tefillin inside. Say, when you come to that section in the Talmud, I don't know what you're doing in the Talmud there, but let's assume that you're studying something which is permitted. You need to skip those pages. Or when you're learning the Jewish code of law, which again, that's not what you should be studying. When you come to the laws of tefillin, you need to skip the laws of tefillin. Again, a non-Jew is mentioned over there. It speaks about the non-Jew manufacturing the parchment or the boxes in which the parchment goes into. And it says that a non-Jew cannot do this. Well, how about if a Jew is overseeing it? Just stay away from wearing, manufacturing tefillin. And it's not the non-Jew's responsibility to help the Jew do this mitzvah properly and say, your tefillin are too low, your straps are not. That's not your function. Yes, the Noachide is here to serve the Jew and help the Jew serve God, but not in that particular way. All right. Enough said for now on that. 10. If a Noachide is striving in the learning of Torah or keeping the Sabbath in the manner of Jews, or reveals new aspects of Torah, he may be physically restrained and informed that he is liable for capital punishment, but is not put to death. So you don't actually kill him. Even in the days when we had the court of law that did kill for transgressing any of the 7 laws, here they would not. We inform him that what you did is a capital offense, but we don't actually put him to death. Note, the action taken against him is only meant to dissuade him from doing forbidden acts. If the court that is established in consonance with the 7 universal laws gives the death penalty to a Noahite, the execution is an atonement for this person's transgression. And consequently, one who transgresses and is punished by the court can merit a portion in the world to come. Again, just like by a Jew, because they've been atoned. They were killed for their transgression. So that wiped it away. Furthermore, the Noachite must experience reincarnation to be able to atone for transgressions he had done. So that's like 1.5 lines, very, very brief. And we know that there's the concept of reincarnation for the Jews, and they don't even bring a reference source for this, but this is what they're saying, that the Noachide does come back to be able to atone for whatever he did wrong. Huh? Yes, we are going to stop here. Top of page 43, we're up to number 11. And any questions or comments on what we just did now today? Aaron, is he there?
Aaron and
Yeah, I'm here. Pretty much everything is pretty cut and dry.
What was that? Cut and dry.
Yeah, cut and dry. I mean,
All right.
Totally understood. When you did talk about this Girzadik, I think, what did you mean by that? You didn't really go into any more explanation on that.
I can't do it right here, right now. What did you say?
I'm sorry, Aaron, what,
Repeat.
When he was talking about a Gid Soisav, then he talked about a Girzadik that we would go into about later. I was just wondering,
Yeah.
are we going?
That's coming up in number 13, is going to discuss that, about a Ger Tzedek. In other words, let me just give you, we'll see it next time, hopefully, but let me just, our tradition is that if a person is born a Noachite, a non-Jew, so how is one to know if that person is supposed to become a Ger Tzedek, a convert, and become Jewish? Because anybody who wants to, at least in theory, potentially can become Jewish. They just have to go through what it takes to convert. How is one to know if they're supposed to or not? The assumption is to be that they are not. That's the assumption. The minority of the world population of non-Jews are to become Jewish. Okay, the vast majority is not. But how does one know if they should? So if they have this inner drive and they are not satisfied with serving God as a Noachide with the 7 Noachide commandments. And they really do want to do not just more, and they're not satisfied doing it voluntarily, but they want to actually be part of the Jewish nation. And they want to accept that upon themselves and do it in a mandatory fashion and pay the price. And then they go through everything and they do become a convert, a proper convert, as we'll stress when we discuss that next time. Then we believe that actually the Chidah, if I'm not mistaken, is the one who says this, that they had a Jewish soul all along that nobody knew about, including themselves. It was concealed. And therefore, legally, they were not Jewish. They were Noachide. But it's at the time of conversion, it simply became revealed. So they got a new soul, yes. They became Jewish, yes. But it really was inside of them in a concealed fashion all along. And what the Chidah says is that's why the language used in all of the rabbinic literature is ger sheniskayer, which means a convert that converted. It should be goy or something to that effect, sheniskayer. A non-Jew that converted. The convert didn't convert. He's only a convert once he converted. So you say no, because all along, now we know retroactively. But more about that next time.
So wait a minute. He's a Ger Zadik, but if he converts, he becomes a Jew, right?
No.
Well-
Ger Tzedek is the term we use for someone who started off from birth as a non-Jew, as a Noachide, and became a convert. That is called Ger, and we say Ger Tzedek to distinguish it from the Ger Toishav.
So a Ger Toshav is one that knows he's a Noahide. He's going to stay a Noahide. And I mean,
Well,
he can stay.
I don't want to get into exactly what a Ger Toishav is now for two
Right.
reasons. Primarily because it's so much to say about it. But a Ger Toishav, as he just brought down, is one who resolves to keep the 7 Noachide commandments because they are God-given. That would be a Ger Toishav, at least in the times of the Beis HaMikdash.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, anyone else?
There was a question on YouTube concerning the rabbi who was traveling. He met a non-Jew who was interested in being a proper non-Jew.
All right, for those that didn't hear, there was a question raised with regards to what's the story, what's the source, what was the incident, when did it happen, of a great Jewish rabbi who was traveling, and the whole story, and there was a non-Jew, and pretty amazing what this great rabbi instructed him, and I write it down. So, the story took place with the Chidah, Reb Chaim Yosef David Azulai, who lived roughly 300 years ago. Forgive me for not having the exact years of when he was born, etc. And
Which book are we in?
I'll tell you in a moment. One moment. Okay. So the source for it is in a book which is hard to get a hold of nowadays. It's, I don't know if it's out of print, but it's not popular. I think some of you actually have a copy of this section of it. It's called, the name of the book is Magal Toiv. In Hebrew, that would be Mem, Ayin, Gimel, Lamed, and the second word, Tes, Vav, Vez. To transliterate that into English, Magal, second word, Tov.
What book are we in right now?
Oh, so where I know it from is the Kutei Siches, the famous, most fundamental talk of the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach about Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, which is in volume 26. And this essay is the third one for the Torah portion of Yitzrei Jethro. So it begins on page 132. This is a must for every Jew to study. And basically, this is where he introduces in a very formal way the campaign of the Jewish people teaching Bnei Noach and why it wasn't done until now and why now it is time to do it. And this is taken from Tavshin Mem Gimel 5743, which would correspond to 1983. So Passover time of 1983. And in it, in footnote 67, is where he quotes this book with a story of the Chidah. And it was published, it was printed in Jerusalem around the year 1734-ish. Or sorry, 1834. 1834. And it's a whole story. And here we're quoting the part that's relevant to this. And this is the great Chidah documenting an incident that happened with him, what he told this non-Jew. And he says as follows: I told the above mentioned Goy, the non-Jew, that he should tell me in what he believes. And he told me in Hashem, the God of Israel. And I investigated this matter, and it appeared to me that so it was, that was true. And I told him that if so, in the morning and in the evening, he should say the verse, Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel, and fulfill the 7 commandments. And be careful from shituf, the idea of an intermediate, or mixing any other deity powers with the one and only God in any fashion, but rather he should have absolute oneness of God, the God of Israel. And he accepted this, and he said that he will not pray to anything other than Hashem, the God of Israel. So that's the story. So again, it was the Chidah, and the name of the book is Ma'agol Toiv, page 162. That one. Anything else? Well, just to conclude, tonight is Rosh Chodesh for the Jewish people. It is the beginning of the new month, and the month is called Av, And then a bit later, it became nicknamed Menachem of, which means comforting or consoling, because traditionally, for many, many generations, for the past over 2,000 years, this has been the worst, the most tragic month for the Jewish people because of the destruction of the first temple and then the destruction of the second temple exactly on the same date, on the 9th of Av. And therefore, the whole month became a very dark, tragic month. And there are many other tragedies that took place during that time, such as the beginning of the Spanish Inquisition. Lots of stuff happened. And Menachem means to comfort because we have a promise that when Mashiach will arrive and usher in the redemption, so not only will there be no more sorrow, but actually this month will be totally transformed. And not only will the days of mourning and sadness and tragedy be abolished and tears will all be wiped away, but actually the second stage is it will be transformed into days of festivities, happy days, great days, happier than any other festival that we have. And we're getting to that point right now. We can more than just see the light at the end of the tunnel. So a lot of excitement. And the role, of course, of the Noachide is that once we have the temple, then as the verse says, that everybody's going to serve God in unison, and all the nations of the world will come to Yerushalayim, to Jerusalem, to the Beis HaMikdash, and then everybody will be able to bring a sacrifice, not only Jews. And then we surely will be able to accept Ger Toshav once we have all the Jews living in the land of Israel. So then we'll be able to accept Ger Toshav, but it's definitely very, very exciting times. And happens to be that Chaim Chlorofen's second, I'm not saying that this is the first and that's the second in order of any particular order, but the other matter that Chaim Chlorofen has been into for many, many years is the Beis HaMikdash, is the Holy Temple. So they are intertwined. It's not just coincidental. So Chaim Chlorofen is really into the third temple, big time. He's done tremendous stuff. Again, some of it may be controversial, some of it not everyone may agree with, but one thing is for sure, just like he is a forerunner and he's big into the 7 Noachide commandments, he definitely is really big into and does a lot of promoting education and knowledge about the third temple. So next week as well, Emir Hashem, please God, if we can meet Chicago time 7:45, 8:45. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining.